Hello and welcome to PerchPeek Pods, the only global mobility podcast that's dedicated to educating people and talent leaders around all things global mobility. This is episode number 5, and I'm absolutely delighted to say the podcast is already being listened in over 25 countries, and so thank you to each and every one of you in the community for supporting the pod so far. If you do enjoy listening, 2 quick things you can do that really help. 1, hit that subscribe button, really helps spread the word. And secondly, share the podcast with a friend or colleague that you think might find it helpful. Pass the pod on, as they say. In celebration of episode number 5, I'm even more delighted to have a very special guest with me today to celebrate the launch of our newest product, PerchPeek Pro. That very special guest is our very own head of people, Penny Luksic. Penny, welcome to the pod. Introduce yourself to the community.
Hi, Paul. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. This is my first HR podcast experience, so I'm feeling very, very special, very welcomed. As Paul says, I'm the head of people at PerchPeek, and I'm really interested to chat about HR and talent and what people teams are doing in 2024.
Yeah, and that is a perfect segue to what we discussed today. So a bit of a different format today. We're going to blend some bigger HR trends. I'm going to be looking to you to drop knowledge on the HR trends in general. And then we're going to be weaving in how that applies to the world of global mobility, because things are changing, perhaps quicker than ever. We've just come off the back of 3 or 4 crazy years for people teams. And we wanted to do a bit of a pulse check for what are some of the key themes going on in the world of HR right now, and how do they apply to the wonderful world of global mobility. So let's actually start right there. Quick pulse check on HR and what are some of the big things you're seeing in the space and how they apply to HR and people teams right now.
Yeah, a crazy 3 or 4 years. It's been a tumultuous last 12 months, I think, for lots of people teams, definitely people in my network and in my sort of friend group who are in this work. I think HR teams are really trying to do quite a bit more with quite a bit less. That is maybe always the case with this kind of function, but especially in the last couple of years. We're trying to do a lot with fewer people, smaller budgets, and trying to figure out ways that we are part of business strategy and business goals, and not just sort of the service center that I think a lot of companies think about HR as.
Great, lot to dig into there. In terms of the trying to align to being more strategic, that's something we hear all the time in the world of global mobility. As you had people mention it before, global mobility can often be almost the ultimate service center of, hey, we need this person to move here, go make it happen, and not always involved in sort of the decision for why that person is moving, or where we should look to recruit from, or any of the sort of more strategic elements around it. How are you thinking about trying to help guide strategy at PerchPeek, and what are you seeing in HR more generally?
Yeah, I think in HR more generally, we're always dealing with people as, sort of tools of the business or tools of a lot of our strategy. It's sort of that human resources element of people teams. But what we know is that people are doing their best work when they are feeling motivated and curious and like they have the space and the time to focus. And so I think a lot of what we do in people and in HR is identifying how we can enable the people that we work with, whether that's new talent, whether it's retained talent, or people who have been at a company for a long time, just feel really bought into the business and to the strategy.
And how do you try and measure that? Because that's it's quite hard in some extent, particularly the more you grow, the more people you have. How are you thinking about making business cases around making people feel motivated and space and time for doing their best work?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I think it can be a sort of mushy, people-focused thing to say, especially to other business leadership. But I think being able to show things like retention, things like engagement, and you do that with maybe an annual survey or quarterly surveys, whatever it might be, can be closely tied to, the number of goals we hit or how close we get to goals. It can be tied to things like productivity. We think about absenteeism is higher when people aren't engaged. All of those ways that the work gets done is often very closely tied to how people feel.
Yeah, and that's, I think, that blend of some of the quantitative survey data with some of the slightly more qualitative look at what we achieved. And I think that's something I've always loved about working with you, but also see within the industry is you have to try to tie it to sort of real life objectives to show the impact. And I think people teams generally, and this definitely applies to global mobility, it can be hard to get as rich data sometimes as in other parts of the business. And it can feel a bit mushy, as you said there. So you want to try and provide some of the data, but also some of those qualitative stories about, look at this great piece of work that happened and what was it that enabled it to do that. And I think that's something that in the global mobility community we sometimes struggle to do at times, is link the individual unit of someone relocating or an immigration case with the sort of wider impact.
Well, and so often the data comes to you late, right? Like you are trying to see the impact of moving somebody a year after they've been there or after they've done significant training with the team that's in that location. And so you're sort of looking into the future and using data from the past. And it's a really tricky business case to make. Yeah.
And it's, you often, when something emerges as a potential problem, you don't necessarily have great data looking backwards, and you're trying to guess the impact of potential changes. And it's just, it is tricky. And I think with budgets being tight, and I want to go there in a second, trying to link it to overall company goals is more important than ever, but pretty hard to do at times. Pretty hard to do at times, but you definitely give it your best go at PerchPeek. I wanted to go. You mentioned there doing more with less. That would definitely resonate with people listening to this pod. Either a lot of HR teams seen reductions in size, or at least headcount frozen, and that's been a big trend that we've seen within GM. How is that? That's a sort of a easy thing to say. How has that impacted what yourself and other HR leaders are trying to do in terms of becoming more efficient? Tell us about that sort of efficiency drive.
Yeah, I think being efficient, both sort of in practice and also cost efficiency, right, is so much about not taking shortcuts, but closing the gap between the effort and the outcome, or the effort and the output. And I think a big way that I've seen that manifest for myself is in kind of the tools that I'm using in my HR tech stack, for lack of a better phrase. And I think for other HR team members, they're also experiencing being maybe like the only HR person on the team at this stage, or having lost experts in sort of niche functions of the HR, the people world. So you have a lot of generalists who are upskilling for the first time. And so a lot of it is knowing where to find an answer and relying on resources or external tools to kind of make your knowledge and your skill set stretch a little bit further.
Yeah. And on that HR tech stack, and I think this is something that we see GM folk often used to have a team of 6. Now they have a team of 1 or 2 or 3, and they're being asked to do the same, sometimes more work, which is quite daunting. Being told just to make that happen. And I think something we see people wanting to make the case for is how tech can make them more efficient, but not necessarily always feeling like they have the tools or the playbook to make the case for efficiency, whether it be through vendor consolidation or really HR time save So I wanted to dig into vendor consolidation a little bit more, and maybe go into a tactical example of where you've seen benefits both financially in terms of dollars actually saved and in terms of savings. We spoke about HR time saved, and maybe you could just step us through. I know we did a big sort of HRS revamp internally at PerchPeek, and why you did that and how it went and what some of the outcomes were.
Yeah, I love this topic. I love talking about our HRIS consolidation. Yeah, I mean, we at one point had, I think, 3 different HRIS platforms that we were using, and that was specifically because we're a global team. So we
Yeah.
were sort of finding these, single-use platforms for the different types of employees we had or where they lived, and being able to move from 3 platforms into one. There's been so many savings. I remember, I spent tons of time trying to make the 3 different reports look like each other so that I could actually do some sort of analysis on them. People didn't go to the same place for information, so I would have to, I'd need to update multiple things every time something changed. Just all of those like little tiny, thorns in your side during the week are improved by going one place, pulling one report, enabling people to kind of self-serve things in the same way saves me such an unbelievable amount of time and headache. And it also cost a lot less. We were paying 3 different subscription fees every month and on 3 contracts. And I think we are saving like 35% month over month by having 1 instead of 3. So
Yeah, well,
yeah,
I think that's just 35% is the actual dollar saving, which I think is incredible. And who's not going to be happy saving that? But saving that and getting the benefit of time saved, better quality output as well, because
much better quality, so much less room for error,
that's
so
it.
much less room for like miscommunication, confusion, all of that. And all of that is time. It really is. All of that's time. All of that's frustration or headache.
Yeah, and I think that's something. Having been through that process, inevitably there's some people that have to change, and there is some work involved to make it happen. And some
Yep.
people are like, "Oh, I prefer the old system," and inevitably there's some change management around it. But ultimately, when you're up and running, I think it's such a good example of the sort of trifecta of saving actual dollars, improving the employee experience because you don't have different sources of data in different places and having to just maintain all these different systems, and saving time. So it's sort of improve the experience, improve your data, and save money, which is, I think, something that will resonate with mobility folks, and it is a big part of what we're trying to do with PerchPeek Pro as well, is reduce that margin for error as well by allowing people to move to one platform globally for managing their relocation program, and to sort of parlay that example of having to duplicate things in multiple places. We hear that all the time, where one region does thing in a certain way and then a different region does it in a different way, and if you make a change, then you've got to suddenly change the policy in multiple
That's right.
places, or you've got to change the forms in multiple places, and these things that don't seem individually like a lot, but stack up, and I think can eat away a little bit at credibility as well with
Definitely.
employees, if that seemingly simple things just don't work well. Yeah, I think they can really, just undermine with the population. What was the spark for that? Because I think something we see is there's often no one triggering event that makes like, oh, we just paid too much money for the 15th month in a row, or we just have, like any individual month where you're doing the reporting, it's annoying in that month, but it's too much. What was the sort of trigger to say, actually, this is the right time to look at vendor consolidation?
Yeah, I think it was actually an employee relocation. Now that
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it, I think it was, somebody moved, which happens all the time,
Yeah.
whether it's sort of business led or employee driven. And it not only did it present sort of the normal challenges you expect when somebody moves, but I also was having to recreate their information in a different system, and they were in two systems for a while, and so I was paying double, and it just sort
Yeah.
of these things that yeah, didn't need to be
Yeah.
that complicated.
It sort of highlighted, you know, wow, they're literally doing the same thing. It's like we're paying for exactly the same
Exactly.
functionality, and that is, yeah, it's sadly
Right.
too common, and it's sort of, particularly in mobility, it's often not been this very carefully thought through, structured process. It normally emerges out of situations like you say, the business needs someone somewhere, an employee wants to go somewhere, whatever it might be, and that can just lead to a lot of inefficient processes. And it's really worth thinking whether that there are vendors, whether that be PerchPeek or others, that can potentially just make your life easier and improve credibility with employees as well. So really wise words there. Yeah. Oh, and definitely, I'm going to take the shameless CEO opportunity for a plug here. That is a big part of what we're trying to do with PerchPeek Pro is save people time, particularly mobility team members' time and finance team members' time. And I think it's we're not always good in the community of recognize it. We all want to be more strategic. Our time is, the most precious thing, and allowing us to do that, and anything that you can do to save time, as you say, helps you spend more time with the employee and their individual query, helps you spend more time on proactive, slightly more strategic work, which is, I think, something that everybody aspires to do, but doesn't necessarily know how to do. And vendor consolidation is definitely a way, because people don't always appreciate the churn of maintaining relationships, maintaining contracts, all of that stuff that
Mhm.
just does eat into your day. Let's actually dip into that a little bit more. I think one of the hardest things I find when we're catching up, and when I see in the community as well, is the quantity of BAU work in people teams just is just generally massive. It's to
Mhm.
say, like, pretty hard to predict and kind of quite lumpy at times, and sometimes they come in like London buses, like just random things. And that's exactly the same in mobility. Like, no one has a program that is like perfectly 50 moves a month, and it's like always
Right.
like peaks and troughs. So like, there's this very lumpy flow of BAU versus strategic work, which kind of just has to get done anyway. How do you try and prioritize your time to make sure that some of the bigger strategic goals get done? Because I think this is something you're an absolute wizard at, but how are you doing that?
I mean, I was just thinking, I'm not sure how I'm going to answer that question. So I'm
Yeah,
glad
oh,
you
come on.
think that
Don't be humble.
um, what was the question? How do I prioritize?
Yeah, because how do you not just get swept away by the volume of BAU work? How do you sort of think, because you've introduced somebody, went through the whole consolidation of our HR tech stack, completely did a global compensation review, now looking at complete performance. You sort of do all of these big projects as a small team with loads of BAU, so you clearly have some way of getting stuff done still. And I'm just curious as to how you get it done.
Yeah, I think
I don't
I'm,
say you work too much, because that will look bad.
I'm going to say that. But I am sort of like, maybe I'm just so good at this.
Exactly.
Uh, no,
Exactly.
okay. I sort of want to say it's like self-preservation. Like I just have to do it.
Yeah. Nice.
I mean, okay, I think that I do think about the BAU as part of being like a strategic contributor to the company.
Yes.
I am not going to be able to do something that is exciting to me, is strategic, without having a sense that our people are taken care of. I think
Yeah.
I know that my day is going to be lumpy, as you say, or is going to be unpredictable if things like my payroll systems or my
Yeah.
contract process is less than streamlined, And so I think there is this, it benefits me to streamline my BAU, just to consolidate my work and to make sure that I'm able to contribute and able to focus on things that are strategic. And I think it also allows for our teams to focus on things that are strategic. If they know that, they can find information about their benefits in one place rather than 5 places, that is going to help them during their day-to-day and help them focus on what is more fun and more forward-looking.
Wow, such a nice poetic cyclical answer. I love that. Two absolute gems, slightly different. One I didn't expect you to say, but actually automate and standardize the BAU, and this is something that is so important. Everyone has that moment, I'm doing it again, that horrible manual task that I know could be automated, or there could be a tool that could do this better, and just invest that time to make it standardized, and everyone will thank you, and it looks good. And so often, I think within the world of global mobility, whether it's you're pulling a report, or you're managing expenses, or you're just asking for updates about what's going on with your relocator, all of these things, there are ways that you can reduce the time you spend on them. And actually sort of investing in the BAU as strategic work. I love that. I love that nugget. And I think people are starting to be more proactive about doing that. But there's so many great tools to help standardize. And then the second thing really loved is, who are you enabling? You're enabling the business. And relocation is often expensive, and most people in this community will say their people is their greatest assets for a company. They spend a hell of a lot of time and money attracting and retaining talent, and ultimately, if you are able to be better at your BAU, being able to be more strategic, you are facilitating them directly as well, so you almost have the second degree impact on the company as a whole. And I think that's quite easy to lose sight of in the weeds of day-to-day mobility life, and you're sad because your visa's delayed again, or you're sad because some chaos has gone on with something.
Well, there's always chaos, right? There's always chaos. There's also, you think about some of this work is so unpredictable because people are in such unique circumstances. Everybody's got a different, I don't know, I'm thinking about everybody's got a different change of address, or a different kind of family setup, or whatever it might be. None of those examples make sense. Let's cut all of this.
Yeah. I love it.
Everybody's situations are unique. And so you are solving problems that you haven't solved before, and also may never again in your career or in that job. And so I think it can be a struggle to think about investing time into situations that feel like one-offs, or feel like, well, it won't happen again. I don't need to fix it. I just need to get through the problem.
Yeah.
But automating some of that BAU and freeing yourself up to be more strategic about those problems, or get through those problems in a way that costs less or is faster. Yeah, is a huge benefit.
Yeah. And I think that's it. Even just to take one that's been coming up a lot recently, if you're seeing a lot of churn back and forth, whether it be about getting cost estimates to the business, or whatever, or asking for updates, whatever it might be, really challenging yourself to say, is this a true one-off use case? Is this the only time I've seen this in the last month, 3 months, whatever? Or is it something that could be at least process improved?
I think about moments where I've seen sort of, something that feels like it doesn't happen that often, but I'll have, 4 calendar reminders that pop up about it. Or I've created a whole new Slack channel to talk about this thing, which is a pretty good indicator that it happens enough, and it happens with enough chaos that it's probably something that needs a repeatable solution.
Yeah. And you don't think to sort of go full circle to being a bit more strategic in global mobility's case, trying to get a bit more of a seat at the table in terms of guiding companies on where to go. All of that time unnecessarily spent, imagine what you can do with 1, 2, 4 hours back. 4 hours doesn't sound like a lot, but just 4 blissful hours of sitting down and just charging. That's like a lot. I know
No, it's
in my
huge.
working week, if I get 4 hours of head down time to just sit and think, there's some pretty great things that have happened now. So
You can do a lot. You can do a lot with 4 hours.
Yeah, it's a treat, but it's so hard to break out of break out of that. Yeah, those edge cases, and particularly in the world of mobility, where, as you say, it's urgent. If someone's moving and their visa needs something, or their temporary accommodations failed, or whatever, they're always these urgent things, which is pretty hard for people. I wanted to go back a few beats and focus a little bit on something else you mentioned earlier around people, HR almost being more generalists than ever in some ways, and having to take on a wider array of problems than ever before. Not an easy sentence for me to say in my list, but we powered through. So having to take on a wider array of problems. I think in the space of mobility, you had COVID, you've sometimes had evacuations due to war, you've had the rise of remote work and dealing with all of those sorts of things, you've had more business-driven relocation, more employee-driven relocations than ever before. I know at PerchPeek we have our fair share of interesting international relocation challenges, so I'd love to hear how you can share with everyone some of the random challenges we faced at PerchPeek, and how you've tried to sort of quarterback them when there's just no way you can be as on top of them all.
Right. Yeah, I think we are, as HR and people and GM professionals, expected to be more generalist and also take a much broader look at what is happening across the business and to your point, what's happening across the world if you have a global team, and being thoughtful about how those things may impact people that work with you. And so it does kind of bring it close to home. And I think at PerchPeek, we have, in sort of a single week, we're looking at the tax implications of operating in Montana in the US, and Ireland's pay laws, and Portugal's new nomad visa. And those things are so varied and so broad, but are impacting individuals that we work with every day and that are contributing to our business. And so being able to take that global view and then also really attach it to people want an answer, they need an answer, they're relying on us for an answer now, is an interesting challenge. So
yeah,
I think quarterbacking it is a lot of, I think I said this earlier, knowing where to go to find an answer, relying on networks or resources or sort of experts in whatever space you have a question in, is something that I'm doing kind of all day.
Yeah. And what have you found to be good sort of havens of knowledge for you personally?
It's a great question. I think one of the best things about people professionals is we love to share resources. I think we're such a good function in that way. And I love so many of the people in HR Slack communities that I'm a part of. You can always trust that somebody who may not have had your exact challenge or query has had something equally as bizarre or equally as complex. You can find a lot of good support there.
Yeah, I that definitely resonates with me a lot. One of the reasons why I enjoy doing this podcast so much is people love sharing, and often in GM they're in small teams, and if they faced an interesting problem, they've typically found an interesting solution to it. They love sharing it, and vice versa. People love learning, and it's obviously a very difficult function in some ways, but that is a real benefit of it, and leverage that. Go into the Slack communities, join your sort of there's Facebook groups, there's LinkedIn groups, listen to podcasts, whatever it might be. There is so much resource out there for learning. And if you do have a specific vendors as well, make sure you leverage them as well, because that's what they're there for. And it is pretty crazy, even just in that array of things you have to deal with across different countries. And I think that is something that is challenging, is that both taxes and immigration in particular can change at any time pretty much, and
constantly changing.
And that employees kind of just expect you to know the answer if you're in mobility. And it's like,
Absolutely.
don't we have someone who can help with that? So how do you try and, you spoke a little bit about trying to solve the problem using your resources, using your vendors, etc. Tell us about managing expectations internally, which I've seen can sometimes be pretty high. Do you know, people are like, oh, surely you know this already. How do you try and manage those expectations internally?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I will say this is also somewhere where HR folks can be strategic.
Yeah.
I think having consistency in where you communicate, how you communicate, those kinds of internal comms channels are really helpful in identifying that, yes, you are a person who's going to deliver information and can be a source of knowledge and source of truth, but you are not just a service center or not just being, able to spit out sort of facts about
Yeah.
Maryland's pay laws at any moment. So I think understanding how to sort of brand yourself internally almost as a people team is really helpful in managing expectations, and also really helpful in ensuring you're kind of have a seat at the table, like you said, in being able to share insights that you've either have yourself or have gained from your community, or yeah.
Yeah, no, it's so true, and I love that element of consistency of comms, and in particular, I think is just so valuable in helping people like understand what you're going through and some of the challenges as well. So
Right.
that definitely resonates. Final one from me, completely different topic in this instance. We're fortunate at PerchPeek, we get to help people relocate all over the world. If you were to move anywhere in the world, Penny, where would you be moving, and why?
Really, it's such a good question. I feel like I'd maybe move different places, different times of year.
Okay, interesting. Bit
I
of
have,
nomad life.
could I, could I have
Yeah,
many, many homes
yeah,
across the
yeah,
world?
yeah, yeah. The world is your literal oyster in this situation. What, but
The world
tell
is
us
my
about
perch.
how many places do you want to live?
I don't know. I'd really love to spend some time in Japan. I think
Mhm.
that would be a lovely place to spend a year, spend a few years.
Yeah,
Um, I'm in the US, and I have never seen much of Canada or Mexico. I've never seen a lot of my own
yeah.
continent, so I'd spend some time above and
In
below as well.
above and below, well, great options, and yeah, definitely. I'd love to be in Japan for the cherry blossom.
Mhm.
So pretty and so much to do. And maybe one day, Paddy, we'll make it happen. But otherwise, thank you for jumping on and sharing so many insights today. It's been good to see your uh, methodologies coming through for and share some of the trends going on in HR, because I do think so. It is interesting how closely paralleled they are to exactly what we hear in the mobility community
Mhm.
more generally, doing more with less, trying to be strategic without getting weighed down by some of the inevitable BAU. Weighed down probably isn't necessarily even the phrase. And then just the volume of new challenges being faced every day. Obviously teams do face new challenges, but they're not normally as linked to sort of changes in government's tax, immigration laws,
Right,
etc., which is
right.
kind of a very stressful aspect, particularly from a compliance point of view. And definitely some great tips in terms of being resourceful and leaning on your vendors there. So thanks very much for coming on, Penny, sharing your wisdom with the group. Good
Thanks
job by
for
you.
having me.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers.